Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn, and we are continuing our conversation with Traci Hutcherson. She's got an awesome blog called BeneathMyHeart.net. On top of being a wonderful career person, she is the mother of 5 precious children, 4 boys and a girl, loving husband, Cy. And man, we've had a great time this week.
We have.
Had a lot of fun, and hard to believe we're already on our 4th program, but we have enjoyed every minute of it. And if you missed any of those, we encourage you to go to the website, hopeishere.today. And you can catch those 14-minute podcasts. And, you know, Traci, we were talking about that. I mean, one thing that you were talking about, how do you learn and things like that. Share what you share with me before you went on the air about how you listen to podcasts, how you multitask or plan out so you can fill your tank with new things.
I love listening. Podcasts are my new thing. Like, I'm falling in love with them. So since my son Jonathan moved to Nashville, which we'll be talking about soon, I have a 3.5-hour drive down there. And I used to just listen to music. And now I've got to where I listen to podcasts. Absolutely love them. I also love to listen to them when I'm doing laundry because I have lots of laundry to do with all these kiddos, and it takes a while. And I used to, you know, sometimes people can watch TV or whatever, but our laundry room is kind of at the back of our house. So I love bringing my phone in there, listening to podcasts, just kind of. There's so many good ones out there, and you can just learn so much from other people, whether it's a faith-based podcast, whether it's just a professional development type podcast. I have learned so much, and I will truthfully say I've started listening to podcasts less than a year. I've been listening to them regularly, weekly, and I will have to say I feel like I'm a better person, and I know that's like a broad statement, but I really have learned so much about myself. I'm 47 years old, and I'm learning that I still got a lot of growing to do and learning to do, and still got, hopefully, Lord willing, a lot of life left. So podcasts have been amazing.
And that's how you fill your tank, because you're giving out a lot. You're a mom, you're a wife, you know, you've got a career. So it sounds to me like it's a great way to fill your cup.
It is, especially, you know, if you can find a podcast that hits where, you know, if you like this one, if you need some hope in your life and things are feeling kind of bad, then tune in. Don't fill your mind with things that aren't going to build you up. Don't waste your time with that, and fill it with things, you know, my mom would always say, because what goes in is going to come out. So fill your head with those good things. And so that's what I try to do. And so if I'm needing encouragement as a mom, I might find a really good mom podcast of other moms that are going through things like me. Or maybe I have a passion. Well, I do have a passion for home improvement. You know, there's some great home improvement podcasts that can teach me how to do things around the house. So just use that time to just, you know, like I said, put good things in your mind. Help make you a better person, not negative stuff.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit. Jonathan's your oldest, and, you know, as we shared yesterday, we went off the air. God blessed him, and he had a great musical gift, but was on the 10th season of The Voice. But things didn't start out real good. Let's talk a little bit about that.
No, it didn't. So Jonathan was our first-born son. So excited to see that little boy. And when he was born in the hospital, he failed all of his hearing tests. Which as a new mom was devastating, and it was actually not a first birth good experience, truthfully. He failed his hearing test, even though the nurses weren't extremely kind in the way they handled it. It was kind of like, yeah, he failed it, you're gonna have to do more testing. And I remember just being like, what does this mean? Is he deaf? Can he not hear me? You know, and as a new mom, you know, you panic over everything. I was freaking out. And so one of the things that I did is that I have pictures of, you know, when they wheel you out of the hospital, with your little flowers and balloons that were in your room, and you're holding your baby, and it's supposed to be this joyous experience of taking your child home with you. And I have pictures, and the pictures I have, I'm holding Jonathan, but my eyes are just red and swollen because I had been crying in the hospital so much, not knowing what was in store for my child and I. A long story, well, I don't know, I get long, but I was gonna say long story short, but it keeps going. But basically, we did not fully know about Jonathan's diagnosis till he was 2.5. So It's kind of hard to explain, but this happens a lot, is that when I went to my pediatrician, he was very assuring to me that Jonathan was perfectly fine, that tons of kids will fail those tests because they have fluid on their ears, or maybe they just weren't still, and that there was a really high false positive rate, and don't worry. And so we would like clap our hands, and Jonathan would kind of jump, and we were like, oh, he can hear. Look, if I bang a pot, he hears. And so we just kind of, because we trusted our pediatrician, and I'm not saying anything bad about him because he was a wonderful pediatrician, but we just trusted, and we didn't take him to do further testing. The testing that they had scheduled him for was like he was born in July, and they scheduled him, the first available was like in November. Well, by that time, he was moving his head toward the sound of our voice, and so we were like, oh, it was a fluke. So I have to give you that background, but that was a very scary moment. But then he started developing well, so we assumed everything was okay. So fast forward to when he was 2.5, and we were eating dinner with him one night, my husband and I at the table, and I was asking him a question, and he didn't respond, and I could tell that he could not hear me, and I kept saying, Jonathan, and Jonathan, and I just kept yelling it louder and louder. He was directly sitting right beside me, and I was getting no response. And immediately, that fear of that mom in that wheelchair coming home from the hospital just came over me, and I was like, he's deaf, like, oh my gosh, this has happened. And I called my mom, because that's what we do, right?
Absolutely.
We call our precious mamas first, and she said, oh, honey, it's going to be okay. And I said, Mom, he does not hear me. And my husband was trying to get his attention, and we knew immediately there was zero. He could not hear anything. And we immediately made an appointment for the next day. I couldn't sleep that night. I went to the doctor's appointment, and to much delight, he had fluid on his ears. So that's,
wow.
Well, that's part of the story. So we were like, oh my gosh, that's what it was. Silly me, overreacting. Mom said, see, Tracy, I knew it. I was praying. I knew that baby. Nothing was wrong with that baby. Mom, you can hear my mom saying that, right?
Absolutely.
I knew it, Tracy. And I was like, oh, it was fluid. Thank goodness. So they gave him an antibiotic. His hearing did come back. It did improve. But something was just not quite right. And as a mama, we know, I could notice differences in Jonathan. I noticed he was reading my lips. He was looking at my mouth instead of looking at my eyes when I talked to him. I noticed he was only 2.5, but he was started getting the remote and turning the volume up on the remote on the TV. So I was like, is it because he's just old enough now that he's figured out how to learn to use the remote? Or can he not hear anymore? And then I noticed that if his back were to me, he wasn't hearing me. So after a few months of that happening, my mother's intuition kicked in, and I was like, something just is not right. He's got fluid on his ears again. I still did not worry that he was deaf. I just thought it was fluid again. So I took him to the doctor, and that's when we discovered he did not have fluid on his ears. So part of Jonathan's story is there probably was an initial hearing loss. There definitely probably was a hearing loss at birth. And then maybe when he had fluid on his ears, it took it down a few decibels enough to where we noticed it. So Jonathan, at that point, we learned he has only 50% of his hearing in both ears, which is probably what he was born with. We just did not recognize it until he was 2.5, which, as I've learned, is very common for a lot of parents with deaf children. And so at age 2.5, he got his first set of hearing aids.
Wow.
Yeah.
And first child, I mean, that's not what you had planned, right?
Not at all. And I have a little excerpt. I think we have time for me to read this. So I want to share part of Jonathan's story, which is my favorite part of his story. But as I told in one of your earlier episodes, journaling is really important to me. And my mom would write us notes as children. So I wanted to carry on that tradition and write notes for my kids. So it was actually September 16th in 2002. So Jonathan was 2.5 years old, and the day that we found out he had hearing loss, I went home and wrote what happened in our journal. So I wrote, Dear sweet Jonathan, you are mommy and daddy's pride and joy. You are, actually he was 3 years by that time, 3 years and 2 months old. Today I took you to Dr. Speech's ear, nose, and throat specialist to check your hearing. I thought you had fluid on your ears from your allergies. And I'll skip a little part. It said, however, the news was surprising and disappointed. We found out today that you have nerve damage in each ear causing a hearing loss. I was shocked and saddened. Your daddy wasn't with me, so I had to be strong. You were so cute when they tested your ears. You were so quiet and good. Because you wanted a sucker, because they said he'd get a sucker while they were testing him. I said, we haven't met with an ear specialist yet, so we don't know the severity of your loss or how to help you. Most likely you will need a hearing device, and it will affect the rest of your life. This was very difficult to me at this time. I tear up even now, but It was such a scary moment because I didn't know if he would eventually, the one thing they can tell you with hearing loss, there's no guarantee that your child will not lose all their hearing. So it was still very iffy at this time, very scary point. I said, but I'm not going to worry. God has his hand all over you. I know he has great plans for you. He has gifted you with an amazing personality. You're a people person. He's gifted you with musical talents. That was at age 3.
Wow.
I said, use them to sing his praises. Jonathan, when we got in the car after your appointment, we headed to McDonald's to eat because I promised you we would. And I immediately began to cry as I was driving. You noticed in the rearview mirror and said, Mommy, why are you crying? And I said, because I love you so much. You love me so much, you said? I do. And he said, you need me, Mama? And I said, I do, baby, I do. A few minutes later, you began to sing, as you always do in the car. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I can't cry without singing, Greg. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And he's singing, the little boy, he sang all the time. I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. He's singing out the window. And I said, your voice was so precious to me. And you continued, let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm going to let it shine. Jonathan, I know in my heart that no matter how this hearing loss will affect your life, I have no doubt your light will shine so bright for Jesus. It will. Shine, baby, just shine. You're my boy. Love, Mommy. So I wrote that when he was 3. And the irony and the just beautiful goodness of God is I had no idea how big that light was going to shine, and that it would shine in front of millions on this on NBC The Voice. Like, I literally had no idea. And I will preface saying that just because he got to be on the stage, just because our light can still shine.
Absolutely.
If Jonathan had never had that opportunity. So I've always said to him, when I wrote that, I didn't mean it was going to shine on the stage of a national television show. I meant it was going to shine for Jesus, whether it be he was going to be a teacher or whether a banker or whatever he was going to do, that God was going to use that hearing loss for his good, that God can take something that we see as bad and he can turn it into something good and use it to glorify him. So that's just a special entry in his journal for me.
Well, that's huge. And, I mean, we want to encourage you moms out there, you're listening, and maybe you've got a challenging health situation with one of your children, and yet want to encourage you not to give up and to keep praying, because I know your mom was a woman of prayer and prayed her heart out. And
yes, absolutely. And she did pray for Jonathan's healing, his ear. She would pray for his healing. And, that healing didn't come. Jonathan still has a hearing loss, but it's his story. It's his story. And I've even asked Jonathan before, Jonathan, if you could have full hearing now, would you want it? If right now you could have full hearing, if God could heal you right now. And he thought about it. I remember we were in a drive-thru at McDonald's. Seems like McDonald's is a theme here. We've been to McDonald's a few too many times. But he thought for a while. This was when he was probably, 14 or 15 years old. And he said, no, Mom, I don't think I would. He said, because it's who I am. It's my story. It's who God made me. And this is my story. And I think that's part of just embracing that story that God gave you. And I love the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That they said, God's going to be with them in the fire. And it says that they knew that God could survive, or they knew that God could protect them from that fire, or get them out, survive. I'm not saying my words right. But they said, even if he doesn't, we will still praise him. And
Amen.
That's what I wanted to say with Jonathan. Like, even if he doesn't heal us, my mom passed away. We prayed for her to survive. We prayed our hearts out, and he didn't. And you think, why, Lord? And that's where Mom said, I don't always understand God, but I trust him, right? And that's the thing I try to tell people all the time. Life can go our way sometimes, and it can be great, but even if it doesn't, I'll still praise him. Even if it doesn't, he's worthy of our praise, and he has a greater good from our suffering. Whatever we go through, he has a purpose for it, more than what we know with our earthly minds. So.
Amen. Well, we got to wrap up this program. We're going to have Traci stay for one more, because I wanted to share some about the experience of going on The Voice. I mean, I know lots of people love that program, and just want to hear about what that was like traveling with Jonathan, maybe a little bit more of the process of him with his hearing, and just more that God's done in her one and only life as we celebrate moms this week. You're listening to Hope is Here.
CMI is your full-service human resources provider in Central Kentucky. For 15 years, CMI Human Resources has taken great pride in helping organizations and people work. Whether it's employee handbooks or help in filling a position, no job is too large or too small for CMI. Contact the professionals today at CMI Human Resources, 859-296-2800, or online at cmiconsulting.com.